Let me tell you about a particular kind of person. Someone who has mastered the art of listening without sharing anything about themselves. There's a psychology behind this silence, a reason why opening up feels impossible for some people, even when they're drowning. You might know someone like this. You might even be someone like this. And if you are, you've probably gotten really good at making it look normal, like you're just naturally private or independent. But here's the thing that doesn't get talked about enough. That silence around your own pain, it's not really about being independent, it's about fear. It's about a lesson learned so long ago that you don't even remember learning it. See, there are people who learned early that their problems were inconvenient. Maybe they had a parent who was already drowning, who couldn't handle one more thing, and so they learned to swallow their struggles before they could even form words. Or maybe they grew up in a house where emotions weren't discussed, where weakness was something you hid, where asking for help meant you'd failed somehow. Some people watched someone they loved suffer in silence and thought that's what strength looks like. Others learned something different but equally damaging. They learned that when they showed vulnerability, it got used against them. It became ammunition. So they built walls, thick ones, and those walls have been standing ever since. Here's what's fascinating about this pattern. It doesn't just disappear when you become an adult. It gets stronger. It becomes so integrated into who you are that you can't even see it anymore. You think you're just being responsible. You think you're just not wanting to burden people. You think you're being considerate. But what you're actually doing is protecting yourself by making sure no one gets close enough to hurt you. And you're doing it so skillfully that nobody, not even you, realizes that's what's happening. Here's the thing about people who never share their problems. They're usually the ones everyone leans on. You're the rock. You're the one people call at 3 in the morning. You listen better than anyone they know. You remember details about their lives they've forgotten themselves. You're the therapist of your friend group, the shoulder to cry on, the person everyone trusts with their deepest stuff. But when it comes time for you to need something, the conversation gets uncomfortable. You minimize, you deflect, you redirect. No, I'm fine, but tell me about you. And you say it so smoothly, so naturally, that the other person forgets they were even asking. You've developed this almost supernatural ability to absorb other people's pain while keeping your own locked away in a vault nobody has the combination to. What psychologists have discovered is something really important about this dynamic. When you habitually avoid sharing your struggles, your brain actually develops a kind of hypervigilance to everyone else's pain. You become acutely attuned to the suffering of others because you've spent so long managing your own in isolation. You pick up on micro-expressions, tone shifts, the way someone holds their shoulders. You're reading people like a book, constantly assessing their emotional capacity, their bandwidth, whether they have room for one more problem. And most of the time you decide they don't, so you stay quiet. And that decision makes sense to you, because you're convinced that the caring thing to do is to protect everyone from the burden of knowing you're not okay. But here's what's deeply ironic. This protection mechanism, this thing you're doing to be kind, is actually the opposite of kindness. Because when you refuse to share your real struggles with someone, you're essentially saying, I don't trust you enough to be real with you. You're denying them the opportunity to actually know you, to care about you, to be there for you. You're keeping the relationship shallow by design, and then you wonder why you feel lonely even when you're surrounded by people. You wonder why connection feels impossible. It's because you've never actually let anyone see you. Think about what happens in your mind when a real struggle comes up. When you're stressed, anxious, overwhelmed, whatever it is, your first instinct isn't to reach out. Your first instinct is to solve it yourself, to figure it out alone, to manage it in private. And if someone notices you're off, if they ask what's wrong, you feel a spike of panic, because the thought of actually telling them, of letting them see that you're struggling, feels dangerous. It feels like admitting you're not enough. It feels like you're going to lose something, their respect, their trust, the image they have of you as the strong one, the reliable one, the one who has it together. There's a psychological concept called conditional self-worth. It's when your sense of value is tied to something external. In this case, being the person people can count on, the one who doesn't need anything, the one who always shows up for others. Your worth becomes contingent on your performance as the helper, the supporter, the strong one. And the moment you step out of that role, the moment you admit you need help too, you feel that worth crumbling. So you cling to the role. You play it even when you're exhausted, even when you're falling apart, even when staying in that role is actually destroying you. And here's where it gets really psychological. The longer you maintain this pattern, the more it becomes your identity. You're not just someone who doesn't share problems, you're someone who doesn't need to. You're self-sufficient, you're independent, you're strong. But that identity is built on a foundation of pain you've never processed, struggles you've never spoken aloud, wounds you've never let anyone see. So you're actually carrying multiple full loads at once. You're carrying your own stuff, you're carrying everyone else's stuff, and you're carrying the exhaustion of pretending you're not carrying anything at all. What's really interesting is that this pattern often comes with a side effect nobody talks about: perfectionism. When you can't share your problems, you become obsessed with not having them, or at least not showing them. You become extremely hard on yourself. You set impossible standards. You expect yourself to handle everything without breaking, without asking for help, without burdening anyone else. And when you inevitably fall short of those standards, because you're human and humans are imperfect, you berate yourself. You tell yourself you should have done better, managed better, been better. You internalize the message that your struggles are your own fault, your own weakness, your own failure. But here's what many people don't realize about all this silence. It's not actually protecting you the way you think it is. Yes, it keeps people from rejecting you or abandoning you or using your vulnerabilities against you, but it also keeps them from actually loving you. Because the you they love is a construction, it's a carefully curated version, it's the person you're willing to show them, it's not the whole picture. And somewhere deep down you know that. You know that if they really knew all of it, if they saw the whole messy, struggling, scared, imperfect version of you, something would change. They might leave, they might lose respect, they might realize you're not who they thought you were. Except, here's the thing. That fear is usually based on a lie. A lie you learned a long time ago from someone who couldn't handle your emotions, couldn't sit with your pain, couldn't offer you unconditional support. And you've been living as if that lie is the truth ever since. You've been organizing your entire life around the assumption that if people really knew you, they'd leave. So you don't give them the chance. You stay in control by staying distant. You stay safe by staying guarded. You stay connected while remaining isolated. The thing about never sharing your problems is that it doesn't just affect your relationships with other people. It affects your relationship with yourself. When you can't talk about your struggles, you can't process them. They just sit there, accumulating, festering, creating this low-level anxiety and depression that you've learned to live with so well that you barely notice it anymore. It's just your baseline now. You're tired all the time, but that's normal. You're anxious about things you can't quite name, but everyone's anxious. You feel disconnected even in intimate relationships, but that's just how you are. Except it's not. It's a symptom of a pattern that's been running your life since childhood. And here's the secret that changes everything. Vulnerability is not weakness. It's actually one of the most courageous things a person can do. It's saying, I'm struggling, and I'm going to let you see that, and I'm going to trust that you won't leave. It's breaking a pattern that's been protecting and harming you simultaneously for years. It's choosing authentic connection over safe distance. It's risky, absolutely. There's no guarantee that every person you open up to will respond with compassion, but here's what is guaranteed. If you never try, if you never risk it, if you never let anyone in, you'll never experience the thing you actually need, which is being known and accepted completely. The people who never share their problems often end up in this strange position later in life. They look around and realize they've given so much to everyone else, but nobody really knows them. They've been there for everyone's important moments, but they've faced their own struggles alone. They've built this entire identity around being strong and independent, and it's cost them the thing we all fundamentally need: genuine human connection. And by that point, the pattern is so deeply embedded that changing it feels impossible. It feels like dying. Because who are they if they're not the strong one? Who are they if they admit they need help? But that's the real tragedy here. You are so much more than that role. You are allowed to be struggling and worthy. You are allowed to need things and still be strong. You are allowed to ask for help and still be admirable. You are allowed to be imperfect, incomplete, in process, and still be loved. That lesson you learned so long ago, that your pain is burdensome, that your needs are inconvenient, that strength means never asking for anything, that lesson was wrong. It was told to you by people who were struggling themselves, who couldn't handle their own emotions, let alone yours. But you've believed it so completely that you've organized your entire life around it. If any of this resonates, if you're seeing yourself in this pattern, if you're recognizing the cost of that silence, that's actually the first step: awareness. Because you can't change what you can't see. And once you see it, once you understand that this wasn't your fault, that you learned this for a reason, that it made sense at the time, you have options. You can start small. You can tell one person one thing that's actually true about how you're feeling. You can practice being a little bit real. You can slowly, carefully begin to let people in. And it will be uncomfortable. It will feel dangerous, but it will also be the most freeing thing you've ever done. Understanding these patterns, understanding why we do what we do, that's the first step toward freedom. If you found this helpful, if something in here cracked open a realization about yourself or someone you love, subscribe. Because we're building something here at the Forgotten Self. We're talking about the parts of ourselves we've hidden, the patterns we've never named, the psychology behind who we actually are versus who we think we have to be. We're creating a space where silence gets to become speech, where vulnerability is strength, and where being seen is not dangerous, it's necessary. Until next time, be brave enough to be real.